need for their protection. The search must continue.
Vamos.
You have to be pretty fit to hunt for manatee in the Aripuanã River. Only small caimans could live in this shallow creek. The spectacled caiman grows to just over 2 meters, but unlike its relative the black caiman, it's unlikely to attack humans. Mark looks for a good spot to begin his search. With a likely-looking area selected, the men string a net across the river. They hope that if a manatee is travelling downstream, they'll be able to corral it, holding it in a netted part of the river for a few days, giving Mark a chance to examine it and confirm the discovery. While the trap settles into the river, Mark, ever inquisitive, takes a stroll. Jungle dramas are being played out at all levels, and Mark finds great interest in it all. From the animals to the plants on which they live, he even spots a new species that he found just a few months before.
Here's the flower of Gustavia. So this represents a new species. It's amazing because it has the biggest fruit in the genus. It has the most spectacular white, distinct flower in the genus. And then it's representing a new species.
Yet another new species. More evidence that the biodiversity of the Aripuanã region ranks among the highest in the world. Aside from little reptiles and insects, there are monkeys here too. The new species of marmoset. Mark can't help but take some time to watch their natural behavior. Like most marmosets, this new species appears to live in close-knit family groups, each defending a territory of their own. He hopes soon to return his captive friend to a wild group like this. At the moment, the little monkey's a bit young to stand its ground with a wild pack, but the time will come soon enough. The word marmoset comes from the French for grotesque, but the squirrel-like monkeys have won Mark's heart. Unlike other primates, these have specialized in eating gum. In areas where gum trees are plentiful, there can be as many as 50 groups of marmosets in a single square kilometre of forest. There are much larger animals in the area too. The tapirs are the biggest, pushing their way through the undergrowth with their compact bodies and feeding themselves with prehensile trunks. This is the common species, but maybe others lurk in the forest. Predators of the tapir are few and far between. The great cats have been almost hunted out of existence, though a few pumas still stalk in the shadows. This is the same kind of mountain lion that ranges from Florida to Patagonia. Unlike many cats, these jungle dwellers are quite unafraid of water. With large predators around, Mark has the safety of his blade, but the knife is more for hacking through the dense vegetation than self-defense.
We set the second fence about 1.5 kilometers upstream, but we saw a place where they recently had browsed the Eliocharis grass.
Francis tells Mark how the dwarf manatee feeds.
So in July he saw from a distance that all these manatee was feeding on a place like this. They have a sloppy way of browsing. They're eating, but then lots of grass stems float, and they don't go into the mouth.
By contrast, the larger manatee doesn't eat the grass. It's a surface feeder, preferring larger aquatic plants like water hyacinth. This adds weight to Mark's idea that the smaller dwarf manatee is a bottom feeder. How much food would it need, and what size of territory would it require? The Amazon manatee eats 10 to 15 kilos a day and spends up to 8 hours feeding. They migrate with the rains and are capable of fasting for up to 200 days during periods of drought. Could this provide a model for the ecology of the new species? The men plan to spend several nights in the forest. The forest provides their evening menu. Watched over by his little companion, Mark catches up on some research. It's important for him to keep up to date with developments in the scientific community. It's easy to nod off when serenaded by a chorus of frogs and insects. Early morning, and the search begins in earnest. The men scour every pool. A few months ago, these fish dispersed through the flooded forest. Now, in the low river, they swim in tight shoals. The men keep an eye out for hidden dangers. Mark spots a stingray, despite its superb camouflage of sand and stillness. It has a poisonous barb on its tail. If it lashes out, it could inflict an agonizing wound. It's nearly a meter across, but quickly disappears again under a fine dusting of sand. A reminder that even large animals can remain undetected in the forest. A kilometer and a half later, they reach the downstream net, but hours in the water have taken their toll.
I feel very cold. I'm totally undercooled, and it shows how you can almost freeze to death in the rainforest. After 1.5 hours diving and looking under the logs and under the deep pools, we didn't find any manatee. But we have good hopes that tomorrow we go another few kilometers upstream.
The men dismantle the lowest net and set up again further upstream. They work in this way for 1 week, covering some 12 kilometers of river. On one trek through the Iguapu, they discover signs of another large animal, the biggest feline predator in the Amazonian jungle. And it has recently sharpened its claws. The predator has left its mark. The scratch marks on the tree trunk show just how high the jaguar stretched.
It's more than 2.5 meters. The moment that I see this, then I think about it as a possible threat. but I still think that a fallen tree or a fallen tree branch is more likely way to be killed here in this forest.
The jaguar, the real lord of the forest, the largest and most secretive cat of the Americas. The dense forest remains its final stronghold.
Jaguars are known to prey upon aquatic animals and caimans, for instance. So it's probably the only predator for the dwarf manatee.
There's just time for one last swim. Plenty of small caimans, but no dwarf manatees. Mark's frustration grows because everywhere in the creek he sees the blunt ends of the Eleocharis grass. He believes only a manatee would chomp the grass like this. He finds a Stone Age carving of a manatee. Why else would ancient Indians depict a manatee in this small creek unless they'd seen them here? All too soon, they reach the lower net. The search is over.
No luck this time. No manatees in this stretch of the river.
Francis, Ephraim and Mark pack up the nets for the last time. The mission is over for the time being. But while they're deep in the forest, one important task remains. Time for one member of the family to say goodbye. Mark had never planned to keep his little stowaway and has decided that it's time to return him to the forest. It will be wonderful to see him back in the wild. If Mark hadn't intervened, it would have stayed tied up in a village hut and would not have lived for long. A life in captivity rarely agrees with wild animals. Mark has had plenty of experience rehabilitating orphaned monkeys into the wild and begins by placing his little friend in a suitable spot. The monkey calls out into the forest, and from a distance, Mark can watch and wait for somebody to return the call. And he doesn't have to wait long. From past experience, Mark knows that if released near a wild group, this animal will be fine. Confident that the troop will now adopt and care for the youngster, and that the little monkey is big and bold enough to stand up for himself, Mark releases him. It's time to leave the forest and its secrets behind. A little disappointed that they haven't found the manatee, but renewed by the wealth of other wildlife in this region. The river may not have yielded a new manatee, but it seems the forest won't let his efforts go unrewarded. A vulture abandons its meal, an agouti. Mark has never seen this species before.
This is an agouti, but I know almost for sure that it's a non-described species of agouti.
Agoutis with orange-brown fur live on either side of the Aripuanã River, but this specimen, sandwiched in the middle, has a greenish-black coat. Agoutis are long-legged rodents that forage for fallen fruits and seeds on the forest floor.